The celestial throne hung in orbit around a binary star system, suspended in space like a jewel caught between two suns. From his position in the diplomatic gallery, Adrian Cross could see the palace's transparent sections, revealing the cosmos beyond. Swirls of stellar nurseries, distant galaxies, and the paired stars themselves casting orange and blue light in competing patterns across the assembled delegates. He'd been briefed extensively on Calethian architecture before this mission, but no amount of preparation could have captured the reality of attending council in a structure where the universe itself served as backdrop to political theater. The throne room, if something this vast could be called merely a room, contained representatives from 47 different species, arranged in concentric circles around a central dais that rose from the floor like a crystalline mountain. Each delegation occupied spaces designed for their specific physiology. The methane-breathing vector in their sealed environmental pods, the massive silicon-based Tharkon requiring reinforced platforms, the graceful Celethine who preferred to hover rather than stand. Adrian and his small human delegation occupied a modest section near the outer ring, newcomers seeking admission to an empire that had existed for millennia before humanity had even developed written language. He'd been preparing for this mission for 3 years, learning Calethian social protocols, studying their history, memorizing the intricate web of political alliances and ancient grievances that defined imperial politics. His briefing materials had been comprehensive: trade routes, cultural taboos, proper forms of address for 17 different ranks of nobility. Everything he needed to present humanity as worthy candidates for membership in the most powerful political entity in this sector of the galaxy. What the briefing materials hadn't prepared him for was her. Queen Vela Mortakis sat upon the throne, though "sat" seemed inadequate to describe the way she occupied that space. She was tall, even by Calethian standards, perhaps 8 feet when standing. Her skin was deep bronze with patterns that seemed to shift in the light, geometric designs that might have been tattoos or might have been natural markings. Adrian's briefing materials hadn't been clear. Her hair was long and silver-white, bound in intricate braids that incorporated what looked like living metal, threads of copper and gold that moved subtly as if responding to her thoughts. She wore robes of deep crimson that seemed to be woven from light itself, and across her shoulders rested a mantle that resembled folded wings. Actual wings, perhaps, in her species' distant evolutionary past, now reduced to ceremonial significance. But it was her face that held Adrian's attention. Calethians were humanoid enough that human instincts for reading expressions mostly applied, but different enough that every feature carried an alien elegance. High cheekbones that could have been carved from marble, a strong jawline, lips that were fuller than human standard but perfectly proportioned. Her eyes were large and golden, actually golden, not metaphorically, like molten metal captured in living form, with pupils that dilated and contracted in patterns that didn't quite match human responses to light. She'd been speaking for the past 20 minutes, addressing a trade dispute between the Tharkon delegation and the Celethine Merchants Guild. Her voice carried through the chamber without technological amplification, something about Calethian physiology that allowed them to project sound in ways that bypassed normal acoustic limitations. The language was High Calethian, which Adrian's neural translator converted to English in real time, but even through the translation he could hear the music in it, the subtle harmonics that conveyed meaning beyond mere words. The ancient compact specifies that mining rights in contested sectors shall be determined by the principle of first discovery, not first development, she was saying, her golden eyes moving between the two delegations. The Tharkon may have established operations first, but Celethine surveys documented the asteroids 3 generations prior. Therefore, by precedent established in the 6th Council of, she continued, laying out a legal argument that drew on centuries of imperial law, synthesizing contradictory precedents into a judgment that seemed to satisfy neither party completely, but left both feeling they'd been heard fairly. It was masterful diplomacy, the kind Adrian had studied in theoretical courses but rarely seen executed with such precision. Around the chamber, delegates were nodding, making notes, exchanging glances that suggested impressed acceptance. The Tharkon representative, a being that looked like an animate boulder with too many eyes, rumbled something that Adrian's translator interpreted as grudging agreement. The Celethine merchant prince, hovering in his anti-gravity field, made a gesture with his 6 manipulator arms that apparently indicated formal acquiescence. "This judgment is entered into imperial record," Vela announced, and Adrian watched as holographic scribes throughout the chamber updated their displays. "Let it be known that the celestial throne values justice over expedience and wisdom over immediate gain." There was formal applause, a complex gesture that varied by species but universally signaled approval. Adrian joined in with the human delegation's response, a simple clapping that felt almost primitive compared to the elaborate displays surrounding them. "Now," Vela continued, her eyes scanning the assembled delegates, "we turn to the petition submitted by the Terran Diplomatic Corps, representing the species known as humanity, requesting provisional membership in the Calethian Empire with associated trade rights and defensive alliance protocols." Adrian felt his heart rate spike. This was it, the moment his entire career had been building toward. Ambassador Chen, leading their delegation, stepped forward to the designated speaking area, a circle of light that materialized at the base of the Queen's dais. "Your Majesty," Chen began, his voice amplified by the chamber systems, "humanity comes before the celestial throne with profound respect and earnest hope. We acknowledge that we are young as galactic civilizations measure such things. Our species has only traveled beyond our home star for 3 generations. But in that time, we have demonstrated adaptability, creativity, and a genuine desire to learn from older, wiser cultures such as your own." It was a good opening, humble without being obsequious, acknowledging humanity's junior status while subtly emphasizing their potential. Adrian had helped write this speech, spending weeks refining every phrase to thread the narrow path between confidence and deference that Calethian protocols required. Chen continued, outlining humanity's achievements. Their success at establishing peaceful contact with 17 different species, their contributions to xenolinguistic theory, their development of novel approaches to environmental restoration that had caught the attention of several imperial research institutions. It was all true, all documented, all designed to present humanity as worthy of consideration despite their relative youth. Adrian watched the Queen as Chen spoke, trying to gauge her reaction. Her face remained composed, attentive but unreadable. Her golden eyes tracked Chen's movements with the kind of focus that suggested she was absorbing every word, every nuance, analyzing not just what was said but what was left unsaid. And Adrian found himself thinking, she's magnificent, not just beautiful, though she was beautiful in a way that transcended species, not just powerful, though her authority over this vast empire was absolute. It was something more, the way she held herself, the intelligence visible in her eyes, the careful balance of strength and grace. She commanded this space not through intimidation but through sheer presence, a kind of gravitational pull that made everything and everyone orient themselves toward her. He'd met powerful people before, heads of state, corporate magnates, military commanders, but he'd never encountered anyone who embodied power so completely that they seemed inseparable from it. She wasn't performing authority. She simply was authority, the way stars simply were luminous. Chen was concluding his speech now, offering formal submission to the Queen's judgment, expressing hope that humanity might prove worthy of the honor of membership. It was well delivered, hitting all the right notes, following all the proper protocols. Vela raised one hand, a gesture that commanded immediate silence throughout the vast chamber. "Ambassador Chen of Terra, Your petition is noted and will be given proper consideration. The celestial throne does not make such decisions lightly. We will require time to review the documentation you have provided, to consult with our various councils, to determine whether humanity's inclusion would benefit the empire as a whole. The standard response. Neither acceptance nor rejection, just the expected bureaucratic neutrality. Adrian had anticipated this. They all had. The real negotiations would happen over the coming weeks in smaller meetings, quiet conversations, carefully orchestrated diplomatic dances. However, Vela continued, and something in her tone made Adrian's attention sharpen, we note with interest humanity's apparent facility with cultural adaptation. Your ability to learn our languages, to study our customs, to present yourselves in accordance with imperial protocols despite having no historical exposure to them. This suggests a species capable of genuine integration rather than mere surface compliance. That was more positive than expected. Adrian felt hope spike. Maybe. The most magnificent woman I've ever seen. The words came out as a whisper, barely audible even to himself. Adrian hadn't meant to speak them aloud. They'd been a thought, an internal observation, the kind of thing that lived safely inside his head where diplomatic protocols couldn't be violated. But he'd been transfixed, watching her speak, and somehow the thought had escaped his careful mental control and become actual sound. The chamber went silent, not the polite silence of attentive listening, the stunned silence of profound shock. Adrian felt blood drain from his face as he realized what he'd done. His neural translator had been active, which meant it had automatically broadcast his whispered English into High Calethian for everyone in the chamber to hear. He just called the Queen magnificent, out loud, in the middle of formal diplomatic proceedings, in front of representatives from 47 different species and probably 300 individual delegates. The human delegation was staring at him in horror. Ambassador Chen's face had gone through several colors and settled on a pale gray that suggested imminent cardiac arrest. The other species were reacting in various ways, some confusion, some amusement, some what looked like scandalized offense. And Vela, Queen Vela Mortakis, ruler of the Calethian Empire, absolute authority over 163 inhabited star systems, had stopped speaking mid-sentence. Her golden eyes, which had been scanning the entire assembly, now locked onto Adrian with the precision of a targeting laser. She turned fully toward him. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a predator identifying prey or a scholar examining an unexpected anomaly. Her silver-white hair shifted with the motion, the living metal threads catching light from both suns. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, those impossible golden eyes, held something that might have been surprise or might have been anger or might have been something else entirely. The silence stretched. Adrian wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow undo the catastrophic breach of protocol his wandering thoughts had created. But speech seemed impossible. His throat had closed. His brain was offering nothing useful except a continuous loop of "you've ruined everything," and 3 years of preparation destroyed in one thoughtless moment. "You," Vela said, her voice carrying through the chamber with that same effortless projection, "are Adrian Cross, junior diplomatic attaché to the Terran delegation, previously assigned to the human settlement negotiations on Kelvar Prime. Age 32 standard years. Fluent in 7 galactic languages including High Calethian, which you learned in only 8 months, a rate that impressed your instructors despite your tendency toward what they described as excessive analytical overthinking." She knew his file. She'd studied the human delegation's personnel records. Adrian managed to nod, unable to trust his voice. "And you have just declared, in front of this entire assembly, that I am the most magnificent woman you have ever seen." Her tone was completely neutral, giving no indication whether this statement had offended her, amused her, or simply confused her. "Is this correct?" Adrian's diplomatic training, 3 years of careful preparation, should have kicked in. He should have deflected, explained it as a cultural misunderstanding, wrapped it in so many layers of formal apology that the actual content became irrelevant. Instead, he heard himself say, "Yes, Your Majesty, that's correct." More silence. Someone in the Celethine delegation made a sound that might have been a gasp or might have been laughter. Their respiratory systems made it hard to distinguish. The Tharkan representative's many eyes were all focused on Adrian with what he desperately hoped wasn't hunger. Vela studied him for what felt like an eternity. Then, finally, she spoke. "This council session is adjourned. We will resume deliberations tomorrow at the same hour. Ambassador Chen, your delegation will remain available for further questions as we review your petition." She stood from her throne, a fluid motion that seemed to defy gravity, and descended from the dais. As she passed through the chamber, delegates parted like water around a ship's hull, creating a clear path. She walked with that same commanding presence, her crimson robes flowing around her, and Adrian couldn't help but notice that she was even more magnificent in motion than she had been seated. Just before she reached the chamber's exit, she paused and looked back directly at him. "Adrian Cross of Terra, you will report to the Starlight Observatory in 1 hour. Do not be late." Then she was gone, and the chamber erupted into chaos. Dozens of different species all trying to process what had just happened, all talking at once in a cacophony of languages that overwhelmed Adrian's neural translator into simply giving up and displaying error messages. Ambassador Chen grabbed Adrian's shoulder hard enough to hurt. "What?" he said with the kind of careful enunciation that indicated barely controlled panic. "Did you just do?" Adrian looked at his superior officer, at the horrified human delegation, at the assembled representatives from species humanity desperately wanted to impress. "I think," he said slowly, "I just told an alien queen she's magnificent, and now she wants to see me alone, in an observatory, in 1 hour. That's political suicide," Chen said. "That's career-ending." That's also an order from the queen," Adrian interrupted, surprised by his own calm. "So I should probably figure out what to wear to my own diplomatic execution." He had 1 hour to prepare for whatever came next. 1 hour to figure out if his unguarded moment of honesty had destroyed humanity's chances at joining the Calethian Empire, or if maybe, just maybe, it had opened a door that careful diplomatic protocol could never have touched. Either way, he was going to find out what happened when you told an empress she was magnificent, and she actually heard you. The Starlight Observatory occupied a section of the celestial throne that extended beyond the palace's main structure like a glass flower blooming in vacuum. Adrian approached it through corridors that seemed designed to inspire awe or possibly anxiety. The walls were transparent in sections, offering unobstructed views of space, binary stars, and the curved horizon of a gas giant whose rings created geometric patterns against the darkness. Each step felt weighted with significance, as if the palace itself was judging whether he deserved to continue forward. He'd spent the past 53 minutes receiving frantic advice from Ambassador Chen, ignoring most of it, and changing into his formal diplomatic attire, a tailored suit that incorporated subtle references to Calethian aesthetic preferences while remaining distinctly human. His neural translator was still functioning despite earlier error messages. His diplomatic credentials were verified and active, and his heart rate was elevated enough that his medical implant kept offering to administer mild sedatives, which he declined. 2 Calethian guards stood at the observatory entrance, massive individuals in ceremonial armor that incorporated functional weapon systems. They scanned his credentials with devices that projected light patterns Adrian's human eyes couldn't fully process, then stepped aside without comment. The door, a seamless section of the wall, simply dissolved into transparency, revealing the space beyond. The observatory was breathtaking. It was a hemisphere of pure transparency, offering 360-degree views of the surrounding cosmos. The only solid surface was the floor, which was inscribed with star charts that glowed softly in colors that shifted as Adrian watched. At the center of the space stood a single piece of furniture, a raised platform surrounded by holographic displays showing stellar data, gravitational maps, and streams of information in High Calethian script. And standing at the edge of the transparency, silhouetted against a nebula that painted space in purple and gold, was Queen Vela. She'd changed from her formal council robes into something simpler, though simpler was relative when discussing royal attire. She wore a long dress of deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light, with a single ornament, a pendant at her throat that captured both sun's light and refracted it into impossible patterns. Her silver-white hair was unbound now, falling past her shoulders in waves that caught starlight. She looked more human this way, or rather, more person-like. Less the embodiment of imperial authority and more someone who might simply be enjoying the view. She didn't turn when Adrian entered, though he was certain she'd heard him. The door had made no sound, but people who commanded empires didn't survive without excellent situational awareness. "The binary system is called Keyleth and Mora's," she said, her voice softer than it had been in the throne room but still carrying that musical quality. "They orbit each other every 47 standard days. Keyleth, the orange star, is older, more stable. Mora's is younger, more energetic, prone to stellar flares that occasionally disrupt our communications arrays. Together they create this." She gestured to the view, the interplay of orange and blue light painting space in complementary colors. Beautiful and complicated and occasionally destructive. An appropriate metaphor for most things worth having. Adrian approached slowly, maintaining respectful distance. "Your Majesty, I should apologize for." "Should you?" She turned to face him finally, her golden eyes reflecting starlight. "Before you apologize, tell me, was it true?" The question caught Adrian off guard. "Was what true?" "What you said in council, that I am the most magnificent woman you've ever seen. Was it diplomatic flattery that escaped at an inopportune moment? Or was it genuine observation stated without consideration for protocol?" Adrian's diplomatic training suggested deflection. His actual instincts suggested honesty. He found himself following the instincts. "It was genuine. I was watching you handle that trade dispute, synthesizing centuries of precedent into a judgment that somehow satisfied everyone, and I thought—" He paused, then continued. "I thought you were the most remarkable person I'd ever witnessed." Magnificent seemed inadequate, but it was the word that came to mind. Vela's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something warming around her eyes. "You understand that what you did was catastrophically inappropriate by imperial standards. Junior diplomatic attachés do not speak unbidden in formal council. They certainly don't comment on the Queen's appearance. There are protocols stretching back millennia that govern such interactions. I'm aware. I spent 8 months studying those protocols. And yet, you violated them completely within your first major council session." She moved closer, her height making it necessary for Adrian to look up slightly to maintain eye contact. "Some members of my court believe you should be expelled from the Empire immediately. That humanities petition should be denied based on your inability to maintain proper diplomatic decorum." Adrian felt his stomach drop. "Have I destroyed humanity's chances?" "That depends." Vela circled him slowly, studying him from different angles like he was a curious artifact. "On whether your breach of protocol reveals a species fundamentally incapable of understanding imperial customs, or whether it reveals something else entirely." "And what else might it reveal?" She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Adrian could see the geometric patterns on her bronze skin weren't tattoos, but seemed to be part of her actual dermal structure, flowing and shifting subtly. Honesty, genuine reaction without the careful filtering that characterizes most diplomatic interaction, the capacity to see a person rather than just a political entity. I don't understand. Adrian Cross of Terra, do you know how long it has been since anyone said something to me that wasn't carefully calculated for political effect? Her voice carried something that might have been weariness. Since someone reacted to my presence with genuine emotion rather than strategic positioning. I know, Your Majesty. 17 years. 17 years since I ascended to the celestial throne after my mother's death. 17 years of every word spoken to me being weighed, measured, designed to advance someone's agenda or protect their interests or navigate the complex web of imperial politics. She turned away, looking back out at the stars. Do you know what that does to a person? To never be certain if anyone sees you or if they only see your crown. Adrian found himself speaking before caution could stop him. I imagine it's incredibly lonely. It is profoundly, devastatingly lonely. She said it simply, without self-pity, just stating a fact. I am surrounded by thousands of courtiers, advisors, supplicants, allies, and rivals. I attend ceremonies where entire populations gather to see me. I make decisions that affect trillions of lives across hundreds of worlds, and I am more isolated than any hermit on any remote planet. Is that why you summoned me? Because I said something genuine, even if it was inappropriately timed. Partly. Vela touched the pendant at her throat, and the holographic displays around the platform shifted, showing different data. But also because I wanted to see if you would maintain that honesty when confronted directly, or if you would retreat into diplomatic protocols and careful apologetics. And what did you learn? That you're either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, possibly both. She finally smiled, a real smile that transformed her face from imperial authority to something warmer. Tell me about your world, Adrian Cross. Not the prepared diplomatic overview Ambassador Chen presented. The real thing. What is Terra actually like? It was so unexpected that Adrian almost defaulted to the standard briefing material. But something about the way she'd asked, the genuine curiosity in her voice, made him respond honestly. It's beautiful and messy and contradictory. We have cities that reach into the clouds and wilderness that's never seen human footsteps. We have art that can make you weep and wars that we're still trying to outgrow. We're very young as civilizations go. We only achieved space travel 3 generations ago, so we're still figuring out who we are as a species. We make mistakes, a lot of mistakes, but we're trying to learn from them. Your file says you grew up on Terra itself, in a city called Vancouver. Yes, it's on the western coast of a continent called North America. Mountains on one side, ocean on the other. When I was young, I used to watch ships leave the spaceport and wonder what it would be like to see other worlds. And now you have seen other worlds. Was it what you imagined? Adrian laughed softly. Simultaneously more wonderful and more complicated than I ever imagined. The reality of xenodiplomacy is less inspiring cultural exchange, and more trying desperately not to accidentally insult someone by using the wrong honorific or standing in the wrong place. You find it exhausting. I find it necessary. Humanity needs allies. We're surrounded by species that have been navigating galactic politics for millennia while we're still learning not to trip over our own protocols. If careful diplomacy is what's required to build those relationships, then it's worth the exhaustion. Vela studied him with those unsettling golden eyes. But you don't enjoy it, the performance of it. Does anyone? Enjoy performance, I mean. Some people do. They thrive on the theater of politics, the careful dance of hidden meanings and subtle implications. But others, she paused, others find it suffocating. A necessary evil that distances them from genuine connection. Which are you? That's an inappropriate question to ask a queen. You invited me here to see if I'd maintain honesty. That seems like a reasonable test of the principle. Vela's smile widened, bold, foolish but bold. She moved to the central platform, settling onto it with fluid grace. I am the latter. I find it exhausting and isolating and occasionally soul-destroying. But I am also very good at it, which means I cannot stop performing even when I desperately want to. Why not? Because empires don't run on authenticity. They run on stability, certainty, the confidence that someone is in control and knows what they're doing. If I allowed myself to be genuinely vulnerable, to show the uncertainty and exhaustion and occasional overwhelming terror that comes with this responsibility. She gestured to the stars around them. The whole intricate structure would collapse. Too many people depend on me being exactly what they need me to be. Adrian found himself approaching the platform without conscious decision, drawn by the unexpected honesty. That sounds impossibly difficult. It is impossibly difficult. It's also my duty, my inheritance, my purpose. I don't get to choose whether I want this responsibility. I simply have it. She looked at him directly. Do you understand why your whispered comment was so significant? Not because it was inappropriate, though it was, but because it was real. You saw me, not my position, not my strategic value, not what I could do for humanity's petition. Just me. And you reacted with genuine admiration that wasn't calibrated for political effect. I'm still not sure if that means humanity's petition is helped or hurt by my accidental honesty. Neither am I, Vela admitted. My advisors are divided. Some see your behavior as evidence that humans are culturally incompatible with imperial standards. Others argue that your honesty represents a refreshing alternative to the careful deception that characterizes much of galactic diplomacy. And what do you think? I think, she stood, moving to stand directly before him again. I think I would like to continue this conversation, not as queen and diplomatic attaché, but as two people who both find the performance of their roles exhausting and who might benefit from occasional honesty. Adrian's heart rate was definitely elevated now. That seems like it could create diplomatic complications. Undoubtedly. Is that a refusal? He thought about Ambassador Chen's likely reaction, about the protocols he'd studied, about the careful path humanity needed to walk to gain acceptance into the Calethian Empire. Then he thought about the loneliness visible in Vela's golden eyes, the weariness in someone who commanded star systems but couldn't escape performance. No, he said, that's not a refusal. That's acknowledgement that we're both making complicated choices. The most interesting choices usually are complicated. Vela touched his shoulder lightly, a gesture that probably meant something in Calethian culture that his briefing materials hadn't covered. Return to the observatory tomorrow, same time. We will have what my schedule describes as consultation regarding the Terran petition. What actually happens is between us. The court will notice. The court notices everything. Let them speculate. She moved toward the exit, then paused. Adrian Cross, your honest observation today disrupted formal council proceedings, violated approximately 47 protocols, and created significant political complications for both of us. I apologize for, don't apologize. It was the most genuinely alive I've felt in 17 years. She smiled once more, that transformative expression. Tomorrow, don't be late. Then she was gone, and Adrian was alone in the observatory, surrounded by stars and binary suns, and the growing realization that his career had just become significantly more complicated and possibly more interesting than 3 years of diplomatic training had prepared him for. The consultations regarding the Terran petition continued for 6 days. Each afternoon, Adrian would make his way through the Celestial Throne's labyrinthine corridors to the Starlight Observatory, where Vela would be waiting with some new aspect of the cosmos to show him, or some question about humanity that went far beyond standard diplomatic briefings. They talked about art and philosophy and the particular loneliness of leadership. She asked about human literature. He read her poetry by writers she'd never heard of, translations that his neural implant managed with varying degrees of success. He asked about Calethian history. She told him stories about her ancestors that weren't in any official record, personal moments that revealed the people behind the imperial legacy. The court noticed. Of course they noticed. Whispers followed Adrian through the palace corridors. Some delegations began approaching the human contingent with newfound interest, not necessarily friendly interest, but attention nonetheless. Ambassador Chen had oscillated between hope that this might help humanity's petition and terror that Adrian was about to cause an interstellar incident that would be studied by diplomatic scholars for generations. "They think we're having an affair," Vela said on the fourth day, watching a stellar phenomenon through the observatory's transparency, something about magnetic field interactions that created auroras visible across millions of kilometers. Adrian, who'd been studying a holographic representation of Calethian governmental structure, looked up sharply. "Are we?" "That depends on how one defines affair." She turned from the view, her silver hair catching light from both suns. "We meet privately. We share personal thoughts we share with no one else. We enjoy each other's company in ways that have nothing to do with politics or duty. By most definitions, yes, we're having an affair. Just not a physical one." "Yet," Adrian heard himself say, then immediately wanted to recall the word. Vela's golden eyes widened slightly. "Bold assumption, Adrian Cross. Foolish observation, I apologize. Don't apologize. Do you want it to become physical?" The question was so direct that Adrian's diplomatic training short-circuited entirely. That seems like an inappropriate question given the power dynamic." "I'm asking you to ignore the power dynamic for a moment. Difficult, I know, when one of us commands star systems and the other is trying desperately to help his species gain acceptance into said empire. But try. Do you personally want this," she gestured between them, "to become more than conversation and honest admissions?" Adrian set down the holographic display he'd been pretending to study. "Yes. Which is terrifying for approximately 17 different reasons, most of them political." 18 different reasons, Vela corrected. "You forgot the one where I'm a different species whose biology may or may not be compatible with human physiology in ways that matter for physical intimacy. Your briefing material said Calethians and humans are genetically similar enough for—" He stopped. "You're testing me again. I'm always testing you. It's what queens do when they're trying to determine if someone is worth the catastrophic political complications that will inevitably follow." She moved closer. She'd been doing that increasingly over the past days, gradually closing the careful distance that had characterized their first meeting. "But yes, compatibility is possible. Difficult to predict, complicated by cultural and biological differences, but possible. The court really will think we're having an affair if we continue these meetings. Let them think it. Speculation is better than certainty." She touched his face, the first time she'd initiated physical contact beyond formal gestures. Her hand was cool, her fingers longer than human standard. "Tell me what you're afraid of. That this will destroy humanity's petition. That my personal feelings will harm my entire species' chance at galactic integration. And that this is just convenient for you. That I represent a momentary escape from performance, and when you've had your fill of honest conversation with someone who doesn't fear you, you'll return to being queen and I'll return to being just another diplomatic attaché who made poor choices." Vela's expression softened. "Those are valid fears. I won't insult you by denying their possibility." Her thumb traced along his cheekbone, an exploratory touch, learning human facial structure. "But let me offer you a counterargument. What if this is exactly what both of us need? What if your honest observation in council opened a door that's been closed for 17 years? What if I'm not looking for escape but for something real in a life defined by performance? That would make this incredibly important and incredibly fragile. Yes, both of those things." She leaned closer, her face near enough that Adrian could see the geometric patterns on her skin shifting in time with her pulse. "I'm going to kiss you now. If you object, tell me." Adrian's brain offered several diplomatic reasons to object. His heart offered none. No objections. Vela kissed him, and it was simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. Her lips were cooler than human standard, her taste something his brain couldn't quite categorize. But the intent was unmistakable, the desire real, the connection genuine. When she pulled back, her golden eyes were brighter. "We're making this complicated," she observed. "It was already complicated. We're just being honest about it now. Honesty seems to be our defining characteristic." She returned to studying the stellar auroras, but her hand found his and held it. A simple gesture that carried weight precisely because it was so simple. "My advisors have made their recommendations regarding the Terran petition. Most favor conditional acceptance. Humanity would be granted provisional membership with regular reviews. That's better than we hoped for. It's also a political compromise that satisfies no one completely. The factions that oppose human membership aren't happy because they wanted outright rejection. The factions that favor it aren't happy because they wanted full, immediate acceptance." She paused. "And then there's the complication of you and me. Has that been brought up in official discussions?" "Not yet, but it will be. Several council members have made pointed comments about the unprecedented nature of our consultations. Some view it as evidence that humans have inappropriately influenced my judgment. Others see it as proof that humanity possesses diplomatic skills we initially underestimated." "Which is it?" "Neither. Both. The actual answer, that I find you personally fascinating and politically irrelevant, would satisfy no one." She squeezed his hand. "There will be a formal council session in 2 days. I will announce my decision regarding the petition. Whatever happens, whatever complications follow, I want you to know that these conversations have been—" She searched for words. "They've reminded me why I accepted this impossible responsibility. Having someone see me as a person rather than a symbol, someone who speaks honestly even when it's diplomatically inadvisable, that's rare, precious, worth the complications. What happens after the announcement? That depends on several factors. Political reactions, whether the court's speculation about our relationship escalates, whether you want to continue seeing me even after humanity's admission is resolved, and you have no diplomatic reason to maintain contact. I want to continue seeing you, even though I'm impossibly complicated and come with an entire empire's worth of political baggage. Even though, maybe because, I'm discovering that I prefer complicated honesty to simple performance." Vela pulled him closer, resting her forehead against his. A Calethian gesture of intimacy his briefing materials had described, but he'd never expected to experience. 2 days. Try not to cause any additional diplomatic incidents in the meantime. I make no promises." "Good. I'm beginning to suspect that your capacity for inappropriate honesty is exactly what I need in my life." They stood there for a while, surrounded by stars and binary suns, and the growing certainty that whatever happened in 2 days would change both their lives in ways neither could fully predict. The council chamber was fuller than it had been during the initial session. Word had spread that the Queen would announce her decision on the Terran petition, and apparently that announcement was significant enough to draw additional observers. Adrian counted representatives from at least 60 different species, many of whom hadn't bothered attending the original proceedings. The chamber buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages, speculation, prediction, political maneuvering. Adrian stood with the human delegation in their designated section, wearing his most formal diplomatic attire and trying to project calm confidence despite the knot of anxiety in his stomach. Ambassador Chen was practically vibrating with nervous energy, having delivered approximately 3 hours of advice that morning about proper behavior, appropriate responses to various scenarios, and the critical importance of not causing any additional incidents. Vela entered the chamber with the same commanding presence she displayed during that first session: crimson robes, silver hair bound in intricate braids, that mantle of wing-like fabric across her shoulders. But Adrian, who'd spent 6 days learning to read her expressions beneath the imperial mask, could see the tension in her posture, the carefully controlled emotion in her golden eyes. She ascended to the throne and the chamber fell silent immediately. That was her power, the ability to command attention through sheer presence, no force necessary. "We are gathered to address the petition submitted by the Terran Diplomatic Corps," Vela began, her voice carrying through the vast space. "For the past week, we have conducted extensive review of humanity's request for membership in the Calethian Empire. We have consulted with advisors, examined documentation, and personally engaged with representatives of this young species to better understand their character and capabilities." Adrian felt Chen stiffen beside him. The phrase "personally engaged" was going to generate commentary. "The decision before us is significant," Vela continued. "Humanity is young, barely 3 generations beyond their home system. They lack the historical perspective that comes from millennia of galactic interaction. They are prone to mistakes, cultural misunderstandings, and occasional breaches of protocol that more established species would avoid." This didn't sound promising. Adrian's anxiety increased. "However," and Vela's tone shifted slightly, "they also possess qualities that older civilizations sometimes lose: adaptability, genuine curiosity about other cultures, the capacity for honest reaction even when such honesty is diplomatically inadvisable." Several council members shifted. A few looked directly at Adrian. The rumor mill had clearly been effective. "Before announcing our decision," Vela said, "we wish to address a matter that has generated considerable speculation among the court. It concerns Adrian Cross, junior diplomatic attaché to the Terran delegation." Adrian's heart stopped. Chen made a sound like a wounded animal. "During our initial council session, Attaché Cross made an observation that violated numerous protocols. He spoke unbidden. He commented on our person in ways that were inappropriate by imperial standards. His actions generated shock and concern among many present." Vela's golden eyes found Adrian's across the chamber. Some advisors recommended his immediate expulsion. Some suggested his behavior demonstrated humanity's fundamental incompatibility with imperial culture. The chamber was absolutely silent. Adrian could hear his own heartbeat. "We disagree with both assessments," Vela continued. "Attaché Cross's crime, if we may call it that, was not malice or disrespect. It was honesty. He saw us not as a political entity to be carefully navigated, but as a person worthy of genuine admiration. He reacted authentically in a context that demanded performance, and in doing so, he revealed something valuable about his species." She stood from her throne, descending the dais, a deviation from protocol that caused murmurs throughout the chamber. "For 17 years, we have sat upon the celestial throne making decisions that affect trillions of lives. For 17 years, every word spoken to us has been carefully calculated, every gesture measured for political effect. We have been treated as a symbol, a political entity, a strategic resource to be leveraged." She was walking toward the human delegation now, her robes flowing around her. "And then a young human in an unguarded moment saw us as simply a woman worthy of admiration. No agenda, no calculation, just honest reaction." She stopped directly in front of Adrian, close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. "That honesty, that capacity to see people rather than political entities, to react genuinely rather than strategically, is precisely what the Calethian Empire needs from its newer members. We have become very skilled at careful diplomacy and political maneuvering, but we have perhaps lost something in that skill, the ability to connect authentically across species and cultures." Vela turned to address the entire assembly. "Therefore, we announce that humanity's petition for membership in the Calethian Empire is accepted. Full membership, not provisional. They will be granted all rights and responsibilities associated with imperial citizenship, effective immediately. The chamber erupted, surprise, approval, protest, all mixing together. Chen looked like he might faint. Adrian felt lightheaded. Furthermore, Vela continued, her voice cutting through the noise, we are creating a new position within the Imperial Court, Special Advisor for Cultural Integration. This position will be responsible for helping newer member species navigate Imperial protocols while maintaining their authentic cultural perspectives. The position will report directly to the throne. She looked at Adrian directly. We offer this position to Adrian Cross of Terra. Should he accept, he will hold diplomatic rank equivalent to senior ambassador, with authority to challenge protocol when authentic cultural exchange is being hindered by excessive formality. Adrian stared at her. Your Majesty, we understand this is unexpected. You may request time to consider. However, we believe your capacity for honest reaction, combined with your demonstrated diplomatic skills and your recent intensive consultation regarding Calethian culture, there was the slightest hint of a smile, makes you uniquely qualified for this role. One of the council members, an elderly Calethian with elaborate facial markings denoting high rank, stood. Your Majesty, is it appropriate to offer such a position to someone who has, according to court speculation, developed a personal relationship with the throne? Vela's expression didn't change. Council member Reshtari raises a valid concern. Let us address it directly. She turned to fully face the assembly. Yes, we have developed a personal relationship with Adrian Cross. Yes, that relationship influenced our thinking on this matter. Not because we have been inappropriately swayed by emotional attachment, but because authentic connection revealed truths about humanity that careful diplomatic performance could never demonstrate. But Your Majesty, Reshtari began. We are a queen, Vela interrupted, her voice carrying absolute authority. We do not explain our personal choices. We make decisions for the good of the Empire, and we take responsibility for those decisions. If anyone believes that our judgment has been compromised by personal feeling, they are welcome to submit formal challenge to the throne. Otherwise, the matter is closed. No one spoke. Challenging the throne was theoretically possible but politically catastrophic. Rishtari sat down slowly. Vela turned back to Adrian. So, do you accept the position? Or do you prefer to return to Terra and tell people about the time you accidentally called a queen magnificent and somehow didn't get executed? Adrian looked at Ambassador Chen, who had cycled through about 15 different expressions and settled on something between terrified and hopeful. He looked at the assembled delegates, representing dozens of species, all watching to see what this young human would do. Then he looked at Vela, at the woman who'd shown him honest vulnerability beneath imperial authority, who'd spent 6 days sharing thoughts she shared with no one else, who just publicly defended their relationship in front of her entire court. I accept, he said, on the condition that I'm allowed to continue our consultations regarding cultural integration. That seems essential to the position's success, Vela said, that hint of smile visible again. We anticipate extensive private consultations will be necessary. Your Majesty, another council member, this one from the Celethine delegation, spoke up. The court will continue to speculate about the nature of these consultations. Let them speculate, Vela said simply. An empire that cannot handle its queen having authentic personal relationships is an empire too fragile to deserve its power. She addressed the full assembly. We announce humanity's full admission to the Calethian Empire, and we announce our intention to have personal relationships alongside our political responsibilities. Any who wish to object. Adrian looked at his superior officer, at the assembled delegates from 60 different species, at the vast chamber where humanity had just been granted full membership in a star-spanning empire. I think, he said slowly, I accidentally told a queen she was magnificent, and she decided to rebuild imperial protocol around the principle of authentic honesty instead of careful performance. Also, I might be dating her. Also, I just became a senior ambassador. It's been an interesting week. Chen looked like he was about to have several opinions about all of that, but before he could articulate any of them, a messenger approached, one of Vela's personal guards. Special Advisor Cross, the guard said formally. Her Majesty requests your presence in the Starlight Observatory at your earliest convenience. She wishes to discuss the parameters of your new position, and I quote, the ongoing cultural integration consultations that will definitely continue. Adrian felt himself smile. Tell Her Majesty I'll be there immediately. I wouldn't want to be late for my first official advisory session. The guard departed. Chen stared at Adrian with an expression that suggested he was simultaneously proud, terrified, and completely lost. You're really doing this, Chen said. You're taking the position, you're staying here. He gestured vaguely at everything. With her. I am, Adrian confirmed. Turns out sometimes the best diplomatic breakthrough is just being honest about what you see, even when protocol says you should stay silent. That's either wisdom or madness. Probably both. Adrian started toward the exit, but I'm discovering that the best things usually are. He made his way through the corridors toward the Starlight Observatory, past guards and courtiers and delegates, all of whom now looked at him differently. Not just as a junior diplomatic attaché who'd made a spectacular mistake, but as someone who'd somehow turned that mistake into something meaningful. Vela was waiting in the observatory, standing in her usual spot at the edge of transparency, silhouetted against the binary stars. She'd removed the formal ceremonial robes and was wearing the simpler midnight blue dress he'd come to associate with their private conversations. Special Advisor Cross, she said without turning, punctual as always. Your Majesty, Adrian replied, approaching. I thought it appropriate for my first official advisory session. Stop calling me that when we're alone. She turned, her expression softer than it had been in the council chamber. You just accepted a position that will keep you in the Empire indefinitely. Are you certain that's what you want? I'm certain I want to continue seeing you. The position is just a convenient framework. It's considerably more than that. You'll actually have to do the work, help integrate new species, challenge protocols when they hinder authentic exchange, navigate political complications that will definitely arise from our relationship. I know I'm terrified. I'm also more excited about this future than any I'd imagined before accidentally calling you magnificent. Vela closed the distance between them, her hands framing his face in that gesture he'd learned meant affection in Calethian culture. You changed everything with your honesty. You made me remember that underneath the crown and the performance, I'm still a person who wants genuine connection. You made me remember that careful diplomacy isn't the same as authentic relationship. We're going to be terrible at the political parts of this. Probably, but we'll be honest about it. She kissed him then, longer than before, deeper, without the careful hesitation of their first kiss in this same observatory. When they separated, her golden eyes were bright. Welcome to the Calethian Empire, Special Advisor Cross. Try not to cause too many additional diplomatic incidents. I make no promises, Adrian said. Inappropriate honesty seems to be my specialty. It's exactly what I need. They stood there surrounded by stars and binary suns, and the vast complicated future they'd accidentally created together, through nothing more than genuine observation, and the courage to be honest about what they saw. Sometimes the most radical diplomatic breakthrough was simply seeing someone as magnificent and saying so out loud, consequences be damned. Sometimes destiny began with a whispered compliment that was never meant to be heard. And sometimes, when empires and protocols and careful performance all tried to keep people apart, the simple act of authentic connection proved stronger than all of it. Adrian had come to the celestial throne to help humanity gain acceptance into a galactic empire. He'd succeeded, and in the process, he'd found something more valuable than any political alliance. He'd found someone who saw him as clearly as he saw her. someone who valued honesty over performance, someone who was willing to rebuild imperial protocol around the radical principle that even queens deserved authentic relationships. So, Vela said, still holding him close, what should we tackle first? The political factions who oppose our relationship, the cultural integration frameworks that need to be developed. The fact that my advisors are probably having collective panic attacks about what just happened in council. I was thinking we could just watch the stars for a while, Adrian suggested. Be magnificently unprofessional together. Vela laughed, genuine and bright and free of imperial performance. Best advisory suggestion I've received in 17 years. And they did exactly that, standing together in the observatory while binary stars painted space in orange and blue, and an empire slowly adjusted to the radical notion that its queen deserved happiness